What if the greatest obstacle between you and your soulmate was never the distance between your hearts, but the hidden influence of someone who couldn't stand seeing the connection grow? For a long time, everything seemed confusing. Conversations ended in misunderstandings. Trust slowly became uncertainty. Small problems somehow became much bigger than they should have been. You may have blamed yourself. Your soulmate may have blamed timing, circumstances, or even fate itself. Neither of you realized that someone else had quietly been standing in the background, watching the connection, with eyes filled not with happiness, but with jealousy. They smiled when they were close to both of you, yet behind those smiles they planted seeds of doubt that neither of you recognized at the time. But the truth has a way of revealing itself when people stop looking at isolated moments and begin seeing the entire picture. That's exactly what has happened now. Your soulmate recently uncovered something that completely changed the way they remember the past. They discovered that certain words they once believed, certain opinions they trusted, and certain situations that pushed the two of you apart didn't happen naturally at all. Someone had been quietly influencing the story from behind the scenes, hoping that if enough confusion was created, your bond would eventually fall apart on its own. The most painful part isn't simply discovering that jealousy existed. It's realizing how many opportunities were stolen because of it. Your soulmate is now replaying conversations that once seemed completely normal, but today they hear them differently. They remember warnings that suddenly sound manipulative, advice that now feels carefully calculated, and moments when they questioned you instead of questioning the people around them. One realization after another has begun falling into place, and with every new piece, their heart grows heavier. Stay with me, because what they uncovered wasn't just another misunderstanding. It exposed a hidden truth that has left them deeply hurt, incredibly angry, and determined to understand how someone they trusted was secretly working against a connection they are only now realizing was far more precious than they ever imagined. The more your soulmate looked back, the more impossible it became to ignore what had been hiding in plain sight. At first, they believed the problems between the two of you were simply unfortunate misunderstandings. They told themselves that life had become complicated, emotions had become confused, and perhaps the connection had naturally drifted apart. But something didn't fit. Certain situations never made complete sense. Certain conversations always left them with more questions than answers. There were moments when they remembered feeling close to you, only for someone's opinion or unexpected comment to suddenly change the direction of everything. Back then, they accepted those moments without much thought. Today, they see them through completely different eyes. One memory connected to another until an unmistakable pattern began to appear, and once that pattern became visible, they could no longer convince themselves that everything had happened by chance. Have you ever completed a puzzle only to realize one piece had been placed in the wrong spot the entire time? At first, the picture looks almost complete, but something always feels slightly off. Then with one small adjustment, every image suddenly makes perfect sense. That's exactly what your soulmate is experiencing now. The truth didn't create a new story. It revealed the story that had been hidden beneath confusion all along. They began remembering how certain people always seemed unusually interested whenever your name came up. They remembered how encouragement often turned into subtle warnings, how compliments about your connection were strangely followed by words designed to create uncertainty. At the time, it sounded like concern. It sounded like advice from people who wanted the best for them. But genuine concern brings clarity. Jealousy creates confusion. And now they finally understand the difference. There is something important about jealousy that many people never recognize. It rarely announces itself openly. It doesn't always appear through arguments or obvious hostility. More often it hides behind friendly smiles, casual conversations, and carefully chosen words. It asks innocent questions that quietly plant doubt. It offers advice that slowly pulls two people apart while pretending to protect them. It encourages hesitation where trust should have existed. The person influencing the situation may never have openly said, "Don't be with them." Instead, they may have repeatedly highlighted tiny imperfections, exaggerated misunderstandings, or encouraged your soulmate to question things that never deserved suspicion in the first place. Looking back now, your soulmate realizes those weren't random moments. They were carefully placed seeds that slowly grew into walls between two hearts that were trying to understand each other. Imagine walking through a beautiful forest while unknowingly following signs someone secretly turned in the wrong direction. Every choice you make feels logical because you're trusting the path in front of you. Yet with every step, you're moving farther away from your destination. Eventually you begin wondering whether the place you're searching for ever existed at all. Then one day, someone points out that the signs were never pointing the right way. Suddenly every wrong turn makes sense. The problem was never your desire to reach your destination. The problem was that someone quietly changed the direction without you realizing it. That's exactly how this revelation feels to your soulmate. They are beginning to understand that many of the conclusions they reached weren't entirely their own. They were shaped by influences they never stopped to question because they trusted the people delivering them. Now, another painful realization has begun settling into their heart. They aren't only questioning what someone else said. They're questioning why they accepted those words so easily. Why did they doubt your honesty but never question someone else's motives? Why did they allow outside opinions to carry more weight than the connection they experienced with you directly? Those questions have become incredibly difficult to answer because they require looking inward instead of outward. It is much easier to blame another person than to admit, "I should have trusted my own heart." That realization carries a deep sense of regret because they understand that every time they allowed someone else's negativity to influence their decisions, they unintentionally created distance between the two of you. Think of a window that slowly collected dust over many years. At first, the outside world looked slightly unclear, but the change happened so gradually that nobody noticed. Eventually, the dust became so thick that everything beyond the glass appeared distorted. The landscape never changed, only the window through which it was viewed did. Jealousy works in much the same way. It doesn't usually destroy a connection overnight. It slowly distorts perception until people begin doubting things they once believed with complete certainty. Your soulmate now realizes that someone else's jealousy became the dust covering their perspective. They weren't seeing you clearly because they were unknowingly looking through someone else's fears, insecurities, and hidden intentions. There's an old saying that feels especially meaningful here. A lie repeated often enough can sound like truth. But truth only needs one moment to reveal itself. That moment has finally arrived. The evidence became too consistent to ignore. The patterns became too obvious to dismiss. One conversation led to another. One forgotten memory suddenly connected with another forgotten memory until everything pointed toward the same conclusion. You were never the source of the confusion they believed existed. The confusion had been quietly created around the connection itself. And as this realization grows stronger, another powerful emotion is beginning to replace confusion. It is no longer uncertainty they feel, it is anger. Not only toward the person whose jealousy influenced so much, but toward themselves for allowing that influence to shape choices that should have come from their own heart. That emotional awakening is about to change the way they see you, the people around them, and the future of this connection forever. The moment your soulmate finally understood that you were never the real problem, everything they believed about the past began falling apart. It wasn't one dramatic discovery that changed their heart. It was a series of painful realizations arriving one after another until they could no longer deny what had happened. They started replaying old conversations, remembering arguments that once seemed impossible to understand. They thought back to the times when they questioned your intentions instead of asking why someone else seemed so determined to make them doubt you. Suddenly, the pieces began fitting together. The disagreements that once appeared to happen naturally now felt carefully influenced. The distance that slowly grew between you no longer seemed like fate. It felt like something that had quietly been encouraged from the shadows. And perhaps the hardest truth of all was realizing that while you were trying to protect the connection, they had unknowingly been protecting the opinions of people who never wanted to see the two of you happy together. Have you ever walked through a valley on a foggy morning? From where you stand, the entire landscape looks empty. Mountains disappear. Paths become impossible to recognize. You begin believing that the world itself has changed. Then the sun rises, and within minutes the fog begins disappearing. The mountains were always there. The path never vanished. Only your ability to see clearly had been taken away. That's exactly what your soulmate is experiencing now. The jealousy surrounding your connection created a fog that slowly covered their judgment. It didn't erase the truth. It only hid it long enough for doubt to take its place. Now that the fog is lifting, they aren't discovering a new version of you. They're finally seeing the person you always were. As these realizations continue growing inside them, another emotion begins taking hold: guilt. Not the kind of guilt that lasts for a single moment, but the kind that forces someone to question every decision they made. They keep asking themselves, how many times did they try to explain something and I refused to listen? How many moments did I mistake honesty for defensiveness because someone else convinced me to? Those questions have become impossible to escape because every answer points toward the same painful conclusion. You weren't trying to create conflict. You were trying to protect something precious. While others quietly introduced suspicion into the connection, you continued choosing patience instead of revenge. You continued hoping that one day the truth would become strong enough to speak for itself. And now, that's exactly what it has done. Imagine reading a mystery novel where every clue points toward one suspect. By the final chapter, you're completely convinced you've solved the case. Then one hidden piece of evidence changes everything. You suddenly realize the real answer had been present from the beginning, but your attention had been carefully directed somewhere else. Instantly, every chapter takes on a new meaning. Every conversation reveals details you overlooked. Every decision made by the characters suddenly becomes understandable. That's how your soulmate now sees the story of your connection. They aren't rewriting the past because they want to feel better. They're seeing the past through truth instead of manipulation. And that truth has completely transformed the way they remember you. Perhaps one question has quietly remained in your own heart all this time. Do they finally understand what I went through? The answer is becoming clearer with every passing day. They are beginning to understand not only the misunderstandings you faced, but also the loneliness of trying to defend a love while being surrounded by voices determined to weaken it. They now recognize the emotional strength it took for you to remain kind, even when you were misunderstood. They understand the courage it required to stay honest while your words were constantly questioned. Most importantly, they realize that your greatest battle was never against them. It was against an atmosphere of doubt that neither of you fully recognized until now. Another image comes to mind. Imagine finding an old compass that always seemed broken because it never pointed in the right direction. For years you believed the compass itself was faulty. Then one day you discover a powerful magnet hidden beneath it, quietly pulling the needle away from true north. The moment the magnet is removed, the compass begins working perfectly again. You don't blame the compass anymore because you finally understand what was influencing it all along. That's how your soulmate now sees your connection. They no longer believe your love was flawed. They realize outside influence kept pulling their judgment away from what their own heart had been trying to tell them from the very beginning. There is an old saying that feels especially meaningful now. When the truth finally enters the room, confusion quietly walks out. Your soulmate is living that reality. The confusion that once separated the two of you is slowly being replaced with clarity, and with that clarity comes a painful awareness of everything you endured while trying to hold the connection together. They are beginning to admire the strength they once misunderstood. They are beginning to respect the honesty they once questioned. More than anything, they are realizing that while someone else was working to divide your hearts, you never stopped believing that truth would eventually reveal itself. That realization has changed something deep within them, because they no longer see you through the eyes of doubt. They see you through the eyes of understanding. And now, another powerful emotion is rising alongside that understanding. They are no longer asking who caused the damage. They know the answer. The question now is what they are willing to do to protect this connection after finally seeing it with completely open eyes. The moment the truth became impossible to deny, your soulmate felt something they hadn't experienced in a very long time, anger that came from clarity rather than confusion. For so long, they believed the pain between you was simply the result of bad communication, unfortunate timing, or two people slowly drifting apart. They accepted that explanation because it seemed easier than questioning the people around them. But now they understand that what happened wasn't nearly as simple as they once believed. Someone else's jealousy quietly influenced decisions that should have belonged only to the two of you. That realization has left them deeply unsettled because they now recognize that moments which could have brought you closer were instead turned into moments of distance through doubt, fear, and carefully planted suspicion. The hardest part isn't realizing someone interfered. The hardest part is realizing they unknowingly gave that interference the power to shape choices they should have trusted their own heart to. Imagine waking up after years of believing you had been following the right map, only to discover that someone secretly replaced it long ago. Every road you traveled suddenly makes sense. Every wrong turn has an explanation. The destination never changed, but the directions leading toward it were quietly altered by someone who never wanted you to arrive. That's exactly how your soulmate feels now. They aren't only grieving the misunderstandings. They're grieving the time that was lost because they placed confidence in voices that never truly understood your connection. Every memory they revisit now carries two emotions at once. One is sadness for what happened. The other is frustration over how easily someone else's insecurity became stronger than the quiet truth their own heart had been trying to show them. You may wonder why they haven't immediately confronted the person responsible. Why haven't they demanded answers? Why haven't they exposed everything they now understand? The answer is more complicated than anger alone. When a painful truth first comes into the light, emotions move faster than wisdom. Right now, they are sorting through memories that no longer make sense the way they once did. They are asking themselves difficult questions before asking anyone else. Why didn't I notice sooner? Why did I trust repeated negativity without stopping to question where it came from? How many times did I doubt someone who was actually trying to protect what we shared? Those questions hurt because they don't point only toward another person's actions. They also point inward, forcing them to confront decisions they wish they could take back. Genuine growth often begins the moment someone stops asking, "Who hurt me?" and starts asking, "What can I learn from this so it never happens again?" Think about a house that develops cracks in its walls. For years, everyone believes the building is simply getting old. They repair the surface again and again, never realizing that the true problem lies beneath the foundation. Then one day, an inspection reveals that someone intentionally weakened the structure years earlier. Suddenly, every crack has a different meaning. The damage wasn't natural after all. It was the result of something hidden beneath the surface. That's how your soulmate now sees your connection. They spent so much time trying to repair misunderstandings without recognizing that those misunderstandings were being quietly fed by outside influence. Now that they understand where the real damage began, they know repairing the surface alone will never be enough. The foundation itself must be rebuilt through honesty, trust, and the courage to stop allowing outside voices to define what only two hearts can truly understand. Another realization has also begun changing them in unexpected ways. They are no longer angry only because someone was jealous. They are angry because they finally understand how much pain you silently carried while trying to defend a connection that was constantly being questioned. They remember times when you calmly explained yourself instead of reacting with bitterness. They remember moments when you chose patience, even though you were the one being misunderstood. At the time, they interpreted your calmness as weakness or uncertainty. Today, they recognize it as remarkable strength. They are beginning to admire the dignity with which you handled situations that could have easily made someone else become resentful. That realization fills them with both gratitude and regret, because they now see that you weren't fighting against them, you were fighting against confusion that neither of you fully understood. There is an old saying that becomes especially meaningful here. The greatest betrayal isn't always the lie someone tells, it is the truth someone keeps hidden. Your soulmate now realizes that hidden jealousy shaped far more than individual conversations. It shaped emotions, decisions, and opportunities that can never be repeated in exactly the same way. But instead of allowing this discovery to fill them only with bitterness, it is awakening something much more powerful. They are beginning to understand that protecting a genuine connection requires discernment as much as love. It requires the courage to question fear before questioning the person who has consistently shown honesty. That lesson has become one of the most valuable experiences of their life. The anger they feel is no longer driven by revenge. It is becoming determination, the determination to stop giving hidden negativity the power it once had, and to make sure that, from this moment forward, the choices they make come from their own heart instead of someone else's jealousy. As this message comes to its conclusion, there is one truth your soulmate can no longer escape. The greatest discovery wasn't finding out that someone was jealous of your connection. The greatest discovery was realizing that genuine love can survive confusion, distance, and even outside interference, but only if both hearts are eventually willing to face the truth with complete honesty. For a long time, they believed the story had already been written. They accepted the misunderstandings as permanent, convinced themselves that life had simply taken both of you in different directions, and tried to silence the quiet voice inside that kept telling them something never felt quite right. But now they understand why that feeling never disappeared. Deep inside, their heart recognized that the connection wasn't broken because love had faded. It had been buried beneath layers of doubt that never truly belonged to either of you. Once those layers began falling away, everything underneath remained exactly where it had always been, waiting patiently for the truth to finally be seen. Imagine an ancient lighthouse standing on a rocky shore during a violent storm. The waves crash against it endlessly. Thick fog hides its light from every passing ship. For a while, it seems as though the lighthouse has stopped guiding anyone at all. But the light never goes out. It continues shining behind the fog, waiting for the storm to pass. The problem was never the light. The problem was everything standing between the light and those trying to find their way home. Your connection has been much like that lighthouse. The jealousy surrounding it became the storm. Fear became the fog. Misunderstandings became the crashing waves. Yet through it all, the truth never disappeared. It simply waited for the moment when both hearts could finally see clearly again. That moment has now arrived for your soulmate, and nothing they have discovered can be undone. Perhaps you've asked yourself many times whether the pain you experienced had any purpose at all. Why did you have to carry the weight of being misunderstood? Why did it feel as though you were constantly trying to defend something that should never have needed defending? Those questions are completely understandable because when we're living through difficult moments, it's natural to search for meaning. Your soulmate is asking similar questions now, but from a different perspective. They are wondering how they allowed outside voices to become louder than the quiet truth they felt whenever they were with you. They are wondering how someone else's insecurity was given the power to influence decisions that should have belonged only to the two of you. Those questions are difficult because they cannot be answered with excuses anymore. They can only be answered with honesty, humility, and a willingness to grow beyond the mistakes of the past. Think about a sculptor standing before a block of marble. At first, all anyone else sees is rough stone. They cannot imagine the masterpiece hidden inside. But with patience, every unnecessary piece is carefully removed until the true sculpture finally appears. The sculptor doesn't create the beauty. They reveal what was already there from the beginning. In many ways, the truth has acted like that sculptor. It has chipped away every misunderstanding, every false assumption, every hidden influence that surrounded this connection. What remains is something much clearer than before. Your soulmate is beginning to see you not through the opinions of others, not through moments of confusion, and not through fear, but through their own experience of your kindness, your loyalty, your patience, and your unwavering honesty. That vision is becoming stronger every day, and with it comes the realization that they almost allowed something truly valuable to slip away because they listened to voices that never understood your heart. There is an old saying that reminds us, when the clouds disappear, the mountain doesn't become stronger, it simply becomes visible again. Your connection is experiencing that same kind of revelation. The love, respect, and emotional bond didn't suddenly appear because the truth came out. They were always there. The truth simply removed everything that had been hiding them from view. That understanding has become one of the greatest lessons your soulmate has ever learned. They now know that not everyone who smiles at a relationship celebrates it. Not every opinion deserves equal trust, and not every warning comes from genuine care. Discernment has become just as important as affection. They understand that protecting a meaningful connection sometimes requires quietly stepping away from voices that thrive on doubt instead of peace. As this chapter gently closes, don't let your heart remain focused on the people who tried to create distance between you. Their influence only lasted as long as the truth remained hidden. Now that the truth has been revealed, their power begins to fade. Instead, remember what has survived every misunderstanding, every delay, and every season of uncertainty. Your integrity survived. Your honesty survived. Your ability to love without becoming bitter survived. Those are the qualities that time cannot erase and jealousy cannot destroy. Your soulmate is finally beginning to recognize the strength you carried when no one else fully understood your side of the story. Whether this journey leads to a renewed connection, a heartfelt conversation, or simply a deeper understanding between two souls, one thing is now certain. Hidden jealousy may have delayed the path, but it could never rewrite the truth. And once the truth has finally found its voice, every lie, every doubt, and every shadow that once stood between two hearts slowly loses its power, allowing healing, trust, and genuine understanding to take the place where confusion once lived.